Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Collaborative Café for Week 13. If you've already listened to this week's podcast, you've got your 4 moves in hand, and hopefully your team meetings are already on the calendar. But before you dive into those, let's take a few minutes to talk about 4 common mistakes that your learning team should avoid during its development of Collaborative Project number 3. Ready? Then here we go. Mistake number 1, treating the film as the argument. This error is probably the most common. A team gets genuinely moved by Fancy Dance, fascinated by the drug economy in Birds of Passage, or maybe unsettled by the emotional deprivation in Kajillionaire. But then the project ends up being mostly a close reading of the film itself. For example, things like scene summaries, character analyses, or thematic observations. All of which are interesting, but none of which is actually the project. This assignment asks your team to examine and analyze the ethical implications of a digital technology on a real-world social issue highlighted or suggested by your chosen film, and to propose a practical, concrete solution to it. The film is what points you toward the problem. The problem and what your team proposes we as a society do about it is what Collaborative Project number 3 is really all about. Next, avoid identifying an issue and technology that has nothing to do with women's lives specifically. The course is IAH 241G Women Behind the Camera and on Screen. And that framing is vital to your 3rd collaborative project. When your team identifies a social problem and how technology might amplify it further, make sure that you can draw a direct line between technology on the one hand and its particular impact on women, or on communities where women carry a disproportionate share of the harm, on the other. A jurisdictional database that fails to track missing Indigenous women, a financial system that excludes women operating outside formal economies, or maybe a legal infrastructure that treats women's testimony as secondary, those are the kinds of connections that this project is looking for. If your technology could apply equally to anyone, regardless of their gender, dig a little deeper. A 3rd mistake your learning team will want to avoid involves researching around the community instead of about it. When teams move into the real-world research phase of their projects, there's a temptation to rely on sources that describe a marginalized community from the outside. For example, government reports, broad policy summaries, or demographic overviews. Given that 2 of your 3 film options center Indigenous communities, and all 3 show characters pushed to the economic or social margins, this mistake carries particular weight. Look for sources that come from within the community, or that foreground the voices of the people most directly affected. The care and fair principles that your team encountered in Week 12 are directly relevant here. Who owns the story of an Indigenous community, and are you honoring that? Finally, the 4th mistake that your team will want to avoid involves proposing a solution that floats above the problem. This error tends to appear in the final stretch when team members are tired and ready to wrap up their work on Collaborative Project number 3. The proposed solution ends up reading something like increase awareness, or reform the system, or the equally vague invest in underserved communities. But those are very general directions rather than solutions. Collaborative Project number 3 asks for something practical and specific. So, your team should name an institution that could act, name a policy that could change, name a technology practice that could be redesigned, and describe what that redesign would need to protect. The communities represented in Kajillionaire, Birds of Passage, and Fancy Dance have all heard plenty of vague commitments already. Your team's proposal should be something more concrete than that. Okay, everyone. Take care to avoid making these 4 mistakes as your learning team develops and finalizes its collaborative project number 3. That'll do it for today. I'll talk to you during class at the start of week 14. Bye for now.